Hello and welcome to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar. Today is Mental Health Day, and I thought what a great opportunity to really focus on mental health awareness, and certainly at this time of year, and I think this year in particular, there's a greater significance for many people, given, of course, the global pandemic and the fear and the uncertainty and all the stress that has arisen from this situation that has left a lot of people with a decline in their mental health. So today's show, we're going to focus on mental health and also autumn anxiety. So we are experiencing a shift in the climate as well, seasonal climate. And so it's really important to start getting proactive in terms of our mental health. So I've brought on my expert, Dr. Gillian Mandich. She is a happiness expert and researcher. She has done 2 TEDx talks, researches science, and she's the founder of the Institute of Health and Science Research. Did I get that right, Gillian?
You did, yeah.
Yay, so exciting. Well, it is always a pleasure to have you on the show. I absolutely love having you here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And this is the time that we need it the most. And so I thank you for taking the time to join us today.
I always love coming on and talking with you. We have the best conversations, so rich, and I'm excited to chat today.
Yay. Well, I think really it's important to talk about, first off, what Mental Health Day is, and also what mental health in general encompasses, because there's so many varying levels. And I think a lot of people are left in the dark and they don't understand that they may have an issue that is affecting their mental health. It's just as important as our physical well-being and our physical health. But I think that's a lot easier to recognize when we need the help. We have an ache and it's a little instant signal that we need to take care of something in the body, whether it's a sprain, an injury, distress of any kind, or an actual broken limb. That's a clear signal. But when it comes to our mental health, it's like, it's really hard sometimes to define it. So if we can start with that would be awesome.
Yes, for sure. And I think that's why today is such an important day, to have a day that really shines a light on mental health. Because like you said, Tania, if you break your arm, you can see that you are injured. But what's going on inside our head is a completely different thing. And it doesn't visibly look I could look at you and you could be completely happy or stressed or anxious or fearful or feeling down and low, but you could look exactly the same. So it's tricky. And I think the other element of it too, that I really, when I began researching happiness, that I had this like aha moment when I thought about, why was I never taught how to be happy? Right? Like I think about growing up in school, we learn math and we learn science, we take phys ed, we do all of those things, but we're not taught how to be happy very often. We're not taught, what do I do if I'm feeling anxious? What do I do if I'm scared? We don't have that skill set. And then we grow up and become adults. And so part of it really is, one, we need to take the pressure off ourselves, because a lot of it we haven't been taught or learned. So part of the work right now, and why I think World Mental Health Day is so important, is because it really starts to shed a light on that. And in particular, so every year, so the World Health Organization is who does World Mental Health Day, and it's a global movement all across the planet. And every year there's a different theme. And this year, the theme is really increased funding and resources for mental health. And so this is so important, especially right now, because a lot of times, because we realize we don't have the skills to cope, we need resources, we need help, we need tools, we need people, we need therapists, we need counselors, we need stuff to read, whatever it is. And so this year in particular, to recognize that this is a huge gap globally. And so what do we do, and how can we find and access the things that we need in order to function in the best way possible, in order to go through difficult times, do difficult things like living in a pandemic? What can we do to help us kind of get through in the best way possible?
Yeah, I mean, these are all invaluable tools because the answers are there. And so if people just had access to the support that they need and the guidance, they can really help to foster that clear, better mental health. We know that when our mental health declines, it really impacts the quality of our lives in every aspect. Our relationships suffer, our connection to the self is completely disconnected. We can't think clearly. Problem solving skills become an issue, all kinds of things. Irritability, huge factor. And we are really triggered, I think, quite easily versus, having a situation that is just maybe, a normal situation and we overreact because we are so, fearful in this moment or feeling stress or tension, anxiety, all of that is tied to mental health concerns. So I think this is so important to get that word out, to get the message out there. And so to have a world movement helping to bring that awareness, I think is so important, particularly with mental health, where, there's a stigma when it comes to mental health. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and why it is important to speak up, to recognize first that you need help. It's not a weakness to reach out and say, listen, I'm having difficulty coping at this time, and I need some help and support. But I think, as you said earlier, we go to school and we're taught these things, and there's no priority given on the self and how to improve our mental capacity or our mental health in that regard. So we're so used to suppressing and neglecting it that we now are faced in a situation where we feel lost and overburdened.
Oh, for sure. And the stigma piece that you brought up, I think is very real. And that's why I think having days like today, where this is at the forefront of the conversation, is so important, because I think sometimes the concept or the story that we tell ourselves in our head is that I'm weak if I'm not okay. I'm weak if I can't get through this day feeling this anxious, when in reality, that's not truth and that's not what happens, but it's these stories we have in our head. And so I think the other thing is it's not talked about nearly as much. Like if you went out for a run and you hurt your knee or you hurt your hip and we were sitting down having tea, you'd be like, oh yeah, I hurt my knee, I hurt my hip. And we talk about it. But it's, another thing, I haven't been able to sleep because my mind races every time I get in bed. Those are the conversations that are generally happening because we're afraid, we're fearful. And then the repercussion of that is that we feel more and more alone. And one of the things, especially when we're in situations where we can't change the outcome or we can't really change or control what's happening to us, sometimes knowing that you're not alone or that someone else has gone through a similar thing and has got through can be the best thing in the world to hear. And it can bring a sense of comfort and of belonging or of empathy. And that can even help us as we go through the process, when we can eliminate that stigma and recognize that, like you said, mental health is just as important and it really needs to be a prominent part of conversations. And this is why having days like this to bring that awareness, to start to shift the conversation, to normalize that conversation a little bit more, is a really key piece, a big first step in the direction where you start to go to our doctor and don't just talk about what's going on in our physical health. There's different steps along the way, but we don't even think about that. And I think a lot of this has come from just growing up in the culture that we have. And so we have a huge opportunity to be leaders within ourselves, around our friends and family, to, instead of asking, hey, how are you? And they say you're fine. Okay, well, how are you really? The Canadian Mental Health Association had this wonderful campaign earlier this year. What else can you say besides being fine? Let's pick some new words, right? Let's actually tap into how we're feeling, because that is really step one, is that awareness of, like, how am I feeling right now? What am I truly feeling? And if I can dig a little bit deeper and actually feel those feelings, then it can really start to give you some guidance as to how you're feeling.
Yeah, I think that is so key, so important to really honor and recognize what it is that you are feeling. It really ties into being authentic. I think the problem is that we do fall into a pattern. And so when we are asked, hey, how are you doing? We say fine, because we're used to that, and we suppress what is actually going on inside. And that suppression leads to depression. It leads to disease in the body, and all kinds of other things. So it really is important to now start becoming aware of that. And I thought it was interesting, you were talking about if you go for a run, you fall down, we talk about that, but you don't talk about the other issues. But, we also can make light of that situation, and we'll laugh at that. And in these dark moments, it's hard to find that laughter, but I think it is important to try to find some relief, and that could come in the form of laughter. I think it's really important to give ourselves permission to feel good, to allow ourselves to feel better than we currently feel, because I think sometimes we look at a situation like we are experiencing around the world with a global pandemic, and we think, well, I can't be happy. I will not allow myself to be happy, because then now I'm a bad person if I don't take this seriously. So can we talk a little bit about that, and that the happiness that can really change our reality in that moment?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point that you brought up too, because when we think about mental health, we often think about sort of the more challenging side of it, right? Anxiety and depression and fear. But there's another side to that spectrum too, which is feeling joy and contentment and positive well-being and happiness. And oftentimes we block ourselves on that end too, where we don't let ourselves feel those things, or if we do, we minimize it, or we downplay it, or we hold it into ourselves. And I think that that's another really important piece of it, especially through this pandemic. Everybody's experiencing it differently, and part of what it is we all are on our own journey. And when we start to compare ourselves, or we add in the shoulds, I should be feeling this way because I think that, then we get into trouble because we're not coming from ourselves first. And I think sometimes we do need that permission to know that, if you're having a wonderful dinner and that night, in that moment, everything is great and you're safe and you're happy, like savor that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the savoring piece, when we look at happiness research, is a really important element of how we can experience joy and happiness by enjoying what we have in the present moment. And I think especially right now, where oftentimes our mind will wander to what's going to happen next week. Are we going to go into lockdown? Who can I see? Where can't I go? What can't I do? And when we can dial it all back into the present moment, that can be very good for our mental health, because we're not living in the future or the past, but it can also give us an opportunity to look around what we actually have in front of us and to be appreciative and grateful for what is going on in that moment when we are safe and we are okay.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because we have a wide range of emotion, of course, as humans, right? And so we get locked in on one emotion and we kind of, don't shift from that. But it's okay to feel a little bit of sadness and then to also feel happy as well, because you can't be one of those all the time anyway. I mean, does that even exist?
Yeah, yeah. In all honesty, when I
Mm,
started studying happiness, like my personal reason for studying it was because I wanted to learn how to be happy,
mm.
because I wasn't taught. And I was a fairly happy person, but I always felt like the goal in life was to be happy and to get rid of the challenging emotions that I feel,
Yeah,
to
and life
not feel
is
sad, to
perfect.
not feel frustration, to not feel grief, to not feel anger. So
Mm.
when I started studying happiness, I wanted to figure that out for myself. How do I be happy all the time and get rid of all the other things that I don't want to feel? And one of the things that I was really surprised to learn when I really got into the literature was that the goal isn't happiness all the time. And it's not. I mean, I'm a happiness researcher. I'm not happy all the time. And nor would I tell myself, my family, my friends, you listening, anybody, that is the goal. And I think once we can get our mind around that, to know that we actually need to experience like the palette of human emotions to be in the human experience, it can take the pressure off ourselves a little bit. Because when we're not
Yes.
feeling happy all the time, when we're not knowing that, hey, that's okay, because I'm not measuring myself up against an unrealistic, unhealthy ruler of what I think I should be feeling?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I love that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take a break and we'll talk more when we come back. Also, about the autumn anxiety. It's Thanksgiving coming up, and, a little bit of that comparison. The potential to compare does come up around holidays in general as well. So we will talk about some of those concerns and issues. So anyway, stay with us, everybody. It is World Health Day, and today, right here on the Mindset Mentor and Sauga 960M, we are focusing on your mental health, how to nurture your mental health and overall well-being, and also how to cope with autumn anxiety. So more with Dr. Gillian Mandich, the happiness expert and researcher, when we come back after this break. Well, hello and welcome back to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. Today we're focusing on mental health as it is World Mental Health Day. And it's so important to really start taking a look at, how we're feeling, what we're thinking, because it really has a huge impact on, everything in your life and how we react to situations or how we certainly perceive situations, I think more accurately. So really, really great to, delve into the conversation with my dear friend, Dr. Gillian Mandich, who is a happiness researcher, studying happiness for quite some time. And you are also the founder of the International Institute of Health Science Research. And I know there's a lot of science to back up some of the strategies that we can use to really start to create that better mental health for ourselves. And so, I want to talk about, before we took a break, we were talking about how, mental health has not really been a priority for many people. And I think we're now forced into looking at our mental health because of the global climate that we're experiencing, because of the, COVID pandemic. But how can someone who has never made themselves a priority or really acknowledging their feelings, their emotions, how can you now make that shift? And I do believe it is a shift, a mindset shift, to start to put yourself first and recognize your needs, recognize, how you're feeling and what it is that you actually want and need to sort of bring into your life.
Yeah, I love how you said put yourself first, because one of the things as a happiness researcher, when I have conversations with people, a lot of times people will say things, well, I've got to take care of my kids first, or I have to take care of my husband first, or I'm taking care of my parents, or they're putting other people first. And they say, it's not that I don't care about my happiness. It's just that I have a lot of other people I have to take care of. And so I don't want to be selfish and focus on me first. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think is important to know is that when we look at happiness research, it is so clear that focusing on your happiness is one of the least selfish things that you can do. It's extremely selfless, because when you focus on yourself and you take the time to do that, it puts you in a better position for everybody else. Mm-hmm. We can't give what we don't have. If you're a parent and you're really run down, then like you said, you get irritable or snappy with your kids or things. But if you would have taken a little bit of time for yourself, maybe you would be in a different mood. And then that changes our relationships with other people. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the story we have in our head, we have to just retell it to ourselves and keep reminding us. And that's where we can ground ourselves in research, because it isn't just like a feel-good Instagram quote that says, put yourself first. The research and the data is so clear that even on a physical level, because we talk often separately about physical health and mental health, but really they're linked. And even so, my PhD is actually in health science, and health promotion is my area of focus. And so when I study happiness, I'm actually looking at it from a health lens, because when we're happier, our physical health is better. So when you compare happy people to unhappy people live longer. They have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. They heal faster from injury. They have stronger immune systems. So sometimes to get it started, when that can feel so foreign, reminding yourself of the benefits, even in terms of your physical health, or reminding yourself that this is going to put me in the best place to be able to show up for everybody else, and also to show up as the best version of myself. So just erasing that story, rewriting that story, and knowing that it is not selfish to focus on your happiness and your mental health. It's essential.
Oh, I love that you said that, because I think there's so many people right now who are listening to your words saying, oh my gosh, she's absolutely right. But they haven't put themselves first. I saw something the other day, or I read it, and I thought, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And it had to do with parenting. And, obviously as a parent, you are a role model. That's the biggest job, I think, on the planet, right? Raising kids, shaping them, molding them into the person that they are. And of course, everyone has their own sort of inherent DNA in their makeup, but your world is largely shaped by your surroundings. Of course, caregivers, parents being that priority. So this thing that I was reading or heard was about to be the person that you want your child to be, because right there you now are that role model. So when you can take time for yourself You don't have to say it verbally, and teach your children every single moment, because you're teaching and leading through example, because we mimic behavior, we witness that behavior. And so putting yourself first is a beautiful thing. You are happier, you are feeling, like a better version of yourself when you can do that. And so I really think it's important for a lot of people now to start being able to make that shift and know that it's okay to do that. And it can be tough, but I think, like anything in life where we want to achieve progress, is that we have to take some form of action, and at least start with a commitment. So can we say something to ourselves, Gillian, that would be like an affirmation, let's say, or just a positive commitment to ourselves that we will take care of ourselves moving forward?
Yeah, and I love that you called it a shift too, because this isn't like a one day I'm putting other people, and tomorrow I'm going to say, okay, today, Jillian, you are putting yourself first, and then it's done. Yeah. It's an iterative, ongoing process. Some days are going to be easier. Some days are going to be better than others. That's part of the ebb and flow of life too. So part of the work is taking the pressure off ourselves, and realize that it is a process. And so what is the one step, that you can do today to be kinder to yourself, or to do something for yourself? Because over time, that stuff builds. It's like weight loss, right? We don't lose 20 pounds in a day. It happens slowly if you do it in a healthy way. So it's the same process. So one, we need to take the pressure off ourselves. And then I think the other thing is, so often we think like knowledge is power, right? That quote has been attributed to like everybody from like Voltaire to Spider-Man. And it's great. And there's wisdom there. And I think it's important to take it a step further, because it really is only potential power. What matters is the action piece, like you said. And so part of when you look at how to make behavior change, wishing and hoping or saying is really a great first step. And then it becomes, okay, what is that going to look like? So, okay, I'm going to put myself first. How are you going to do that? What is the one thing you're going to do today or tomorrow? And really getting concrete into where and when and things like that to help, because we need to take it a step at a time. But the action piece is the key element, because we can all read inspirational quotes and listen to this show and be so motivated. And then what happens? It wanes. As soon as you turn off the show, life gets in the way, things get busy. And so that's where the structure around it of having an actual plan is a really key piece.
Yeah. And let's talk about also recognizing yourself and acknowledging those moments when you do take that action, no matter how small it is, because we are, rewarding ourselves, right, with the dopamine in the body. So important. Let's talk a little bit about that and how we can get more of that.
Yeah. And it's those small wins. Like, we might not think that they're that big, and yet they really are, even in terms of happiness. What's interesting is that, okay, if I asked you right now on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? What would you say?
7, 8. Mm-hmm.
7. Okay. Awesome. And so what research shows is that if I was to take one of my fancy survey tools that I use, the validated questionnaires, I would probably have got about the same responses you just told me. So as humans, we're actually pretty good at figuring out how happy we are. We're pretty good at figuring that out. What we're not so good at is figuring out what it is that makes us happy. So we often think it's the big shiny moments that bring us happiness. We think of those. And part of it is just because, like, say, for example, we have Thanksgiving. And so we think about Thanksgiving. We've been planning the turkey all week. We've been figuring it all out. We've been adapting everything. But that takes up a lot of our mental real estate. But really, that day is only one day in the 7 days of the week. And so research shows that it's not the big shiny moments that bring us the most happiness. It's the small things done day to day. It's those little moments of joy that actually add up to a happier life. But because we get caught up in the monotony of our day, we don't tend to think about that, how, the beautiful sunrise that you saw this morning, or the wonderful time you had talking to your friend today. But really, those are the things that matter. So bringing our awareness and reminding ourselves that it's the small things that add up to the biggest result. It's not just those big shiny moments.
Well, when you look at it that way, it takes off a lot of the pressure. So it's just like this big sigh of relief, because we don't have to be perfect in every moment. We don't have to achieve everything that we want and start thinking of the end goal. If we have that big, the macro goal, start with the micro goal. What is that micro goal? What is that small thing that you can appreciate and acknowledge or just enjoy throughout that day? So I think it is important to shine that light on your day and say, all right, well, what can I focus on today that will help shift my mood, take me into a different direction? I think it's so important to take a look at our energy and the vibration that we're in, because when we are feeling depressed and we're feeling down, or we're feeling isolated and separated from society and from loved ones, it really alters our physiology. So what can we do in terms of our physiology to make ourselves feel better and to, bring us to a different energy level?
Yeah, one of the things I think in terms of instant shift, there's one of the leading happiness researchers is Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky. She's out in California, and she's been quoted in a scientific paper saying that exercise may be one of the most effective instant happiness boosters. And I think sometimes, especially when we get stuck in our stuff, we actually have to physically move our body to start to shift things. So even going outside and getting for a walk, anything to kind of like physically shift your body can start to bring other changes as well. And research shows that even a 20-minute walk can not only have mood improving benefits, but it also can impact your immune system. And I think especially in the fall, when it starts to get a little bit colder, we tend to want to hibernate inside. It's really important to get outside as much as possible, to get as much sunlight, as much vitamin D as we can, to go out and enjoy the colors of the leaves, dress appropriately. My ski instructor used to say there's no bad weather, just bad dressing for the weather. So, right?
That's a good point. Yeah, it's so true, because don't we put a label on? It's like, oh, if it's raining, it's like, oh, it's raining, it's a bad day. Well, who said it's a bad day? It's the perception. It's just a day, and it's either raining or it's not.
Exactly. So I think that exercise, and it's also important to know that it doesn't have to be like a 60-minute high intensity exercise. Exercise and movement is cumulative throughout the day, and walking is probably one of the most beneficial physical movements that you can do. And so, or whether it's that, or it's whatever you enjoy, swimming, sitting, like getting outside, I think, and moving our body, really, really key, especially in the fall as we're starting to get into winter. That I think is really important. And the other piece too, I think oftentimes, like you touched on that perfectionist thing before, right? And so sometimes it's like, okay, well, I had plans to go for a walk and then I didn't. I was going to go for an hour and then I don't have time. And so it's an all or nothing thing.
Yeah.
But knowing that every little bit counts.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I plan to do 10,000 steps, so I only got to 2,000, and then the next day you don't bother because you now have disappointed yourself, or you think you've disappointed yourself. So it's a bit of a deterrent. But as you say, I think it is important just to get out there. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. And that could look like, even just doing a little dance at home, a freestyle dance, do something.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Just get some movement, walk up and down the stairs if you're in a building or a condo, or just get any form of exercise, walk the dog maybe a little bit longer than you normally would, and just maybe become a little bit more mindful of your surroundings, especially since we're, experiencing the beautiful color change. So we're going to take a break in a moment, but before we do that, can you tell us exactly what autumn anxiety is, and then we'll delve into specifically more how to cope with it when we do come back.
Yeah. So, anxiety is often when we're living in the past or the future. And so we can experience anxiety at any time of the year, at any time of day. And autumn anxiety in particular is just at certain times of the year, different life events are happening, different things are happening that may bring on more stress, or there's changes going on. So this autumn in particular, right, back to school looked a lot different for a lot of people. So now, on top of just the general back to school, which always brings anxiety, now it's your kids are at home or you're sending them to school, and there's a whole bunch of worry and anxiety associated with both of those options, or any option. we're still a lot of people working remotely, we're working from home, the weather's changing, we're getting inside more, we're getting less sunlight. So in the autumn in particular, we start to come off of this high of summer where we're outside and enjoying, and things start, it's like when you get back from a vacation, right? If we can remember what it was like to take a vacation.
Yeah. Once upon a time. Yes. Use the imagination, everybody.
Right?
Visualize it. Yes.
You tend to often, you'll see a little dip
Yeah.
when you get back, because you're back to the monotony of day to day and things are changing and shifting. And so I think, especially as the leaves are changing, we're changing, our emotional states are changing, and to know that that's absolutely normal. And I think sometimes we just go through life and we put our nose down and we do what has to get done. But to know that our environment also impacts how we're feeling in a very profound way oftentimes, I think that's important to know.
Absolutely. As you're talking about that vacation, I was thinking about that. I mean, one of the reasons why we feel so good is that we've actually taken a break. We've taken that breather for ourselves. And, it's why it's so important. Again, like, we know the value of taking care of our physical body, but we also need to take care of our mental capacity, our mental mind, so that we can, reset, regroup, we can think clearer. Things are, not as stressful. So it's really good to take that pause. And we're going to talk more about how we can take that pause when we come back here after the break. You're listening to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960 AM. Hello and welcome back to the Mindset Mentor on Sauga 960. You are joining in for World Mental Health Day. So, of course, we wanted to dedicate the show on fostering greater mental health for yourself, how to nurture a great environment so that you can really have a better quality of life. Our mental health is linked to every aspect of our lives, and we certainly, are better equipped when we can work on our mental health to combat situations and just in our daily lives. So really, really important. And we're also talking about autumn anxiety. My guest expert today is Dr. Gillian Mandich. It's always such a pleasure to have you joining me on the show. You are, a wealth of knowledge and an inspiration to so many people with not only your research in happiness, but, in all of the, the talks and the seminars and the programs that you do and the many articles that you've written really is helping people now to become more aware of mental health and happiness and so much more, and really how we can benefit ourselves in any given situation. So let's continue the conversation about autumn anxiety. Of course, there's so many people right now experiencing anxiety who have never experienced anxiety before, but there's also the other spectrum of people who have a tendency to, get into an anxious state, are now super extremely anxious and having a hard time coping. So what are some strategies and helpful tips and tools that you can offer to give people some support in this time, and especially as we're heading into a holiday weekend as well?
Yeah, I wish I had a really simple answer, like this is what you can do and this is a quick fix. And the reality is we all experience it differently. Different things will work for different people. Different things will work for us at different times. Different things will work better than each other. So part of the work really is for each and every one of us to learn, and I'll definitely share some of the best evidence-based tools. So at least these ones are grounded in research and science. And then it's up to us to try them on, and see what works in different situations. And when we find things that do, I like to think of them like you're putting a tool in your tool belt. So the next time you go to a situation, you can try the tools that you have first. And so I think number one, like you said, is really the awareness piece. So noticing how you're feeling. And anxiety is this tricky thing because it's like a spiral, right? It starts and then it just goes and goes and goes, and it grows and it grows and it grows. So sometimes when we notice we're feeling anxious, it can be as simple, and I say simple in terms of an activity, not mentally simple, it's very difficult, as interrupting our thought pattern. So one of the exercises this is something I do myself a lot, because a lot of days, I'll sit down at my computer and notice I'm feeling anxious, and then all of a sudden the wheels will start going and I'm thinking about what's going on 2 weeks from now and this and that. And so I do this exercise called 3-2-1. So I stop what I'm doing and I look around the room and I label in my head, or I can say it out loud if no one's around, what are 3 things I see right now? Just like physically in the room, 3 things that I see. And then 2, I'll think of two things that I can hear, whether it's the humming of my computer or the bubbles in my can of bubbly here, or two sounds that I hear, the neighbor's dog barking all day, whatever the sound is, and then a smell. I'll smell, am I diffusing lavender right now? Am I smelling what I'm burning in the oven? And so sometimes what that does with the 3-2-1 is it engages some of your different senses, hearing, sound and visual. So sometimes that in and of itself, that 3-2-1 can just be a simple exercise to stop the spiral. And that can be really powerful. And I think that another piece of it too is with anxiety in particular, there's research that shows that even labeling our emotions can lessen the grip that they have on us. So if you're feeling, say, fearful right now, identifying that you're feeling fearful and being like, wow, I'm feeling fear right now, doesn't change the situation whatsoever. But there's research that shows that labeling the emotions can help to loosen their effect. So even tuning into what is it that I'm feeling and putting words to that.
Yeah. So I want to, talk a little bit more about that and just, so that everybody is very clear, because what you're saying is to label the emotion, because often we get stuck in labels and now we get stuck in a negative pattern. And it's really hard to escape that negative pattern when you've placed a label on yourself where you feel it's hopeless, because you are a particular, whatever you have decided, right? So, but there's a big difference of labeling the emotion.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about that specifically.
Oh, I love that too. And if emotion is hard and the label of what that emotion is, tap into your body. How are you feeling? I'm feeling my heart rate is racing right now. I'm feeling that my palms are sweaty. I'm feeling that my gut is in wrenches. So whatever it is. And to your point though, it's not I'm anxious right now. It's I'm feeling anxiety.
Yeah.
Because when we start to label ourselves, that becomes part of our story, and our experience in our life are experiences, and they shape who we are, but they are not who we are. And so that, I love that you brought that up, because I think it's such an important distinction. And even though it may seem like a small thing in terms of the words that we're using, words and language are what shape our experience to a huge degree. And so choosing them intentionally and deliberately is a really important practice.
Yeah, and I think that really ties into, becoming aware of, what you're saying, catching yourself and noticing a pattern. I always try to recognize patterns because I think that patterns are really telling to the quality of your life. So it's going to dictate your results. So if you start looking at some of the patterns that are not working for you, let's look to see an alternative. Like, what can you do instead of that particular thought pattern that you're having that is affecting how you're feeling in a negative way? Find something else that you can replace, or just even that little tiny shift will have a huge impact. And again, we overwhelm ourselves sometimes with thinking that, oh, I have to change my entire life if I want to make change. No, change starts in a moment. Every moment is a choice. So I always believe that, you have the opportunity to choose your reality. And of course, we can't change all the events that happen, the external events in our lives and the circumstances, but we can always change how we're going to react to that circumstance. And so that is powerful. I think that's an amazing thing when we know that we have that kind of power to start to create what it is that we would like to have. So can we look at some techniques? Do you have any ways that we can maybe look towards the future instead of getting stuck in the past that creates a lot of that anxiety, that creates a lot of the depression?
Yeah. And I wanted to highlight something that you said, because I think it's so critical before we get into that real quick. So in research, we have this term, and it's called autonomy. And it's this idea that our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors are self-endorsed and self-chosen. And so like you said, well, we cannot control everything that's going on around us. Focusing on the things that we can control is really, really important. And so much so that research has shown that autonomy, having that feeling like you can control what it is that you can control and choosing to give your attention and your focus there in your life, has more an effect on your happiness than how good looking you are, how much money you have, how popular you are, or how good your sex life is. Wow. So I think we can all agree that those four things are pretty important, right? And they would affect how we feel. And the idea that we have control over the things that we can, and when we give our attention there, that has more of an effect on our happiness. So
Brilliant. Oh, I love that you have shared that
important to
with
know.
everyone. Yeah, because that's something, again, that is a first step. It's like, great. And especially now, because I think so many people are struggling and fighting with the loss of control that they're feeling,
Mhm.
right? Given an uncertain climate. And so being able to control ourselves and how we're feeling, I think is really a key piece to all of that, and can really help to foster that mental health. So today is World Health Day. So let's think about it. Let's check in with each other and really see how you're feeling. I think it's important to have the conversation and to be okay with letting people know how you're feeling. And I was one of those people, absolutely, that I was terrified of showing my emotion. I believe that being vulnerable was a weakness. I have since learned the hard way, many lessons in life, but I know I've learned how vulnerability is such a strength. It's a beautiful, great strength. And I think it's so important. My life completely changed when I was able to open myself up and express how I was feeling, because I lived decades of suppressing emotion. And when you start to suppress emotions and feelings, it's going to come out in a way that is not helpful to you, and that is definitely equated to mental health. So any advice on that regard, Gillian, and how we can be more open and willing to share?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, part of it is really shifting the conversation to recognize that it's okay to talk about our feelings and it's not a weakness. That being said, I think it's important to know your audience, right? And make sure we're in safe, trusted spaces. And, we're not blasting it on Facebook or whatever it is. Like
Yes.
part of it is the environment that we're around, and knowing that we are in a safe and trusted space.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that one of the key pieces through all of this, like, we can look externally to all the things that are influencing, but I think bringing the conversation back within us first. And one of the things to pay attention to that's so critical is our self-talk,
Mm-hmm.
the internal narrative, the dialogue that we're having with ourselves in our heads. Because I often think, like, if I was to hold a microphone to my head and broadcast out what it is that I'm saying to myself, I would never want anyone to hear that. I would never say that to a loved one. I wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
But so often we have this internal self-talk that's very negative or deprecating or cruel to ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing where we have a lot of opportunity to really start to practice self-compassion, to be kind to ourselves, to, instead of "you're a complete failure, you tried," like you said, what are your lessons that you've learned?
Yes.
And tuning into our self-talk. And there's a couple patterns that come up a lot for people. So often we'll do things what's called polarizing. So we'll think about something as either it's amazing or it's horrible, it's
Mm-hmm.
good or it's bad, and there's no in between.
Yeah, we get
Um,
stuck in the fixed absolutes. Mm-hmm.
yes, exactly. Or magnifying. This is a big one, right? Where if 10 people said 10 wonderful things about you today and one person had one mean comment, right? We focus on the one and
Yeah.
not the 10. And it's a natural tendency that we have. And it's called magnifying, where we make the one thing bigger and we tend to minimize some of the others. So noticing where that's happening in your life, that, because oftentimes these are patterns that we have that we don't really realize. And we tune in and we start to listen to ourselves and our self-talk,
It's a
then
scary thing sometimes, isn't it? Yeah.
it absolutely is. And self-talk, it really matters. When you look in terms of the research, when we speak more kindly to ourselves, it not only has effects on our mood, but it has effects on our behaviors, on our thoughts, on our work performance, on our relationships. So noticing, where am I being kind to myself? Where do I have areas of opportunity to shift my self-talk, to challenge what I'm thinking too? Because oftentimes what we think may not, in fact, be grounded in reality. Did someone give you a look because they think you're the worst person in the world? Or was it an off look because they're having a bad day? Whatever the story is, we don't know, but
They
we base it.
probably, yeah, they may not have even been thinking about you at all, and had nothing to do with you. Um, I,
Exactly.
I think it's so important, as you say, to be surrounded by a really good support network. But as your inner self, that inner talk that you have, think of that as an extension of that support tribe, and try to shift that thinking. Because if you had that person that's berating you in front of you every single day, when that person would be ousted from your tribe. You would not tolerate that. So start looking at that as a friendly, connection, and start to say really good and beautiful, positive things for yourself so that you can start to honor and appreciate who you are and let your beautiful inner light shine, right? And so, unfortunately, we are out of time.
Oh my goodness, time flies here.
I absolutely love having you on the Mindset Mentor, Gillian. You are a pleasure to have, and certainly, I love all the advice that you've been able to share and to help everyone at home, all the listeners who need extra help at this time. And it's certainly okay to know that you can get the TLC. Give yourself that mental TLC that you need. This is World Mental Health Day here on the Mindset Mentor. So we do want you to start taking care of your mental health and your loved ones. Any final words for the listeners, Gillian?
Thank you so much for having me. I think that, like you said, taking care, it's really important. And because the theme this year of World Mental Health Day is, increasing access to resources, know that if you're listening right now and you aren't sure how to take the first step, or you don't know what to do, reaching out to the Canadian Mental Health Association. They've got locations all across the country, great online resources, but take that first step to reach out and to know that you're not alone, and that we're shining a light on this conversation for a reason. And I really hope this is just the beginning of these type of conversations, because every single one we have really does help to reduce the stigma and make it normalize it in terms of the conversations that we have. So Thank you for having me today.
Oh, a pleasure. And I certainly look forward to more conversations, in the future with you. And so we do encourage you to have an absolutely extraordinary day. Cultivate a life you love. Every moment is a choice. So today, for World Mental Health, let's choose to really start taking care of our well-being. And it starts with you, and you are the role model to everyone around you. So put yourself first, because you deserve it. Stay tuned. We'll be back.